All right, we're back at it again. This is part two. I've recaptured my voice now. We're gonna get after it today. We talked about a lot of things last time in regards to what Black can do after the Black Plague. Black goes into the Caro-Kann, so we'll go back into the intro just to get everybody back into what we were talking about. We're pal right in the kisser right now, so we got E4. C6, Caro-Kann, we hit him with the swerve, D3. D3 is looking pretty good. They go for D5, and we play knight F3, right? And after DE, knight G5. We talked about a lot of things, like they don't necessarily have to take here. They don't necessarily have to play ED3 after you play knight G5, and then we would play bishop takes D3. They don't necessarily have to do some of the things. That's what we talked about in part one. Part two is where we reach this position here and we really get after it. We're gonna look at some really interesting lines. There's a lot of moves, a lot of themes in this one. So yeah, I think it's super interesting, and it's just so winning, especially at lower levels. You're just not going to see a lot of anything else. I mean, obviously, we talked about some other lines that are possible. You'll see that like 20 to 30% of the time, but the majority of the time, you're just going to get a winning position. So let's get after it. So first things first, right? We reach our position after bishop takes d3. So we can just go through really quick. Bishop takes d3, and what's going on here? Well, if they play knight f6, right? We're already we're already sacrificing on f7, right? So there's a lot every time we kind of reach this position, there should just be this constant alarm in the back of your mind going like, can I take on f7? Like, does it work? And this whole idea is like this queen is still undefended, right? It's technically defended by the king, but like, can we bring the king away with a discovered attack, a discovered check on the king, forcing the king away from the queen, and taking that queen to go up, a queen for two pieces, and that's going to be a pretty constant theme. So right away, knight f6, and I believe knight f6 is the most popular response. If we look at lead chess, yes, so knight f6 is the most popular response, almost 50% of games. The top two responses look at White's win rate. Knight f6, insane, 200,000 games, and you're just up a piece on the spot. How? Well, knight f6, knight takes f7, king takes f7, and now the very pretty bishop g6, right? Bishop g6 check, delivering the check. Obviously, if black recaptures, we simply take the queen. Black cannot drop the king back to e8 and reprotect that queen. There's nothing that black can do, right? So typically HG, which is the top move there, king G, similar situation. You're just gonna absolutely blow them up, and we're just taking the queen, right? It's pretty much game over from here, right? This is undefended. This bishop is like never going out in any way. It's kind of stuck, and your pieces are just going to come out and castle and just kind of maul black here. Just hit him with the boss. So that's Knight of Six. It's just such a pretty line, and you can see that this is just kind of like the main thing that people will go into after Knight F6, and obviously like Knight F6 is the main move that a lot of people are playing after Bishop takes on D3. So we can look at a few other variations. So we have knight takes f7, king takes f7. They don't have to recapture, right? So king takes f7 is the best move, but there's a few other things that black can do here, right? They might recognize, oh no, if I take with the king, I'm going to lose my queen here for two pieces. I don't want to do that. So queen a5 check is another move here. And again, this is still completely winning for white. Bishop d2, simply blocking the check. Queen d5. Knight takes h8. Queen takes g2. And rook f1. So this is another theme we'll see quite often here, and something again we'll see this as we get into let's get into it 2, 3, 4, 5. there's a lot of queen takes G2, allowing black to capture on G2 and just getting a ton of counterplay. It's basically just pawn grabbing at this point, and it's kind of one of those situations where you have certainly tricked your opponent in the opening, and they're kind of like, oh, like I can get you back. And you'll see here that like after knight takes H8, like after you just you don't want to lose the knight, right? So you just take the rook, you're up the material. The rook isn't doing anything on H8, but you're going to lose the knight anyway, so you might as well take the material. And queen takes G2 is by far and away the most popular move. It's kind of this like, oh, I'm gonna get black. I'm gonna get white back here and like take on G2 and there's not much you can do. But really you just consolidate with rook F1 a lot of the time and you're good to go. So after knight takes H8, queen G2, rook F1, possibly something like bishop H3 here, right? Going after your queen, trying to develop their pieces. And you just can essentially continue to develop bishop c3, putting the bishop on this diagonal, eyeing the knight. Queen takes h2, continuing to pawn grab. This isn't going to go well, right? This is not going to go well. And boom, we have bishop takes. This is some of these moves are just ridiculous. Bishop takes h7 here. And this is not necessarily pawn grabbing because we're threatening something here, right? Bishop takes h7 is not just going after and threatening. We're not just taking a pawn for no reason to be up another pawn, right? We're actually threatening something here. And if you look closely, another theme, so theme alert, this queen is eyeing the d file, straight up the d file. This bishop, right, just how we talked about before when we were winning the queen, it can still come to this diagonal, right? And the knight also controls f7 still. So that you have weakness on the light squares. We have control, we would have control of the d file if the bishop wasn't there. And so you can kind of see what's going on here. If I was able to play bishop to g6 right now, it'd be mate, right? If he played h6, it's over, right? Bishop g6 is mate. So that's where you're going to see bishop takes h2. And if they just go and capture, oh yeah, yeah, bishop takes f1, right? Pound, right? It's over, game over, right? It's completely over. Right? If bishop d7, if they're like, oh no, it's gonna be mate, oh my goodness, g6 check, we still check, king d8, boom, knight check, king c8, knight d2, right? Now it can just develop, right? His pieces are all over the board, completely just not coordinated at all, and we're essentially just gonna maul him all over the board, right? We can bring the queen out. I'm just showing a few developing moves, but yeah, now we're gonna attack his queen. He's got to drop it back. Now we're just gonna come in on the H file. This is another nice thing you'll see a lot of the time is rook H1, rook H8 in these positions. That's kind of the idea behind queen F3 here. So queen F3 kind of prepares rook h1, rook h8, using this open file and continuing to attack black weaknesses here on the back rank with this king really buttoned down by our knight and previously our bishop. So yeah, I mean also we have the ability to control the dark squares possibly with like knight c4 and then bishop coming in to e5. What a nice square for the bishop, right? If we can control e5 and get our bishop there, I mean, this is just looking really miserable for black, right? He's completely cut open, and there's almost no place for this queen to go on this diagonal. So getting back into it, queen f3, knight c5, rook h1, queen back, and we're just putting too much pressure here. We're putting way too much pressure. After we develop knight d2, could play queen g2, bishop d3, bishop e8, trying to kick our knight away, knight e5, knight bd7, knight queen f3 again. We could go over, we're up material, so we might as well go for a queen trade here, queen g5, bishop f5, right? We're pinning the knight, blocking the double attack on our knight. Queen king b8 getting out of the double attack or getting out of the pin, excuse me. And then we can just simplify here and we're doing well. I mean, there's really nothing else here. This is completely winning for white. I really don't see. I mean, a lot of these moves are fairly straightforward. It's pretty much develop, attack, try and use the open files, use the open H file, use the open D file, and just put your pieces on the right squares because, I mean, look at Black's pieces. This bishop is completely boxed in the entire time. That's something you'll notice in a lot of these variations. It's just Black's dark squared bishop is garbage, and look at ours. I mean, look at this bishop. It's beautiful. So we could also have king takes f7. So we can go back out of here. Instead of king takes f7, we could have a situation where we have bishop c3, queen takes h2, and so instead of bishop takes h7 here, excuse me, a response to bishop takes h7. So just backing up, backing up to this bishop takes h7 move. Bishop takes h7. We had bishop takes f1. We also had bishop d7, but we could also have knight takes h7. So what if he just recaptures our bishop after taking on after we take on h7 and very simply queen h5 check. I mean, it's really nasty. So we're pinning. So attack obviously on the knight. This bishop is not pinned to the queen because the queen's undefended. And if you just move the king, right, we're just going to continue to attack here. Knight f7, king c8, bishop takes eight, or excuse me, queen takes h7. We win the knight. Queen g2, threatening this particular rook, and we can just defend it, right? Developing with knight d2 and knight d7, castle's long, right? Again, an amazing position for white here, right? We're really sound. We're up material, and I don't see how we're. I mean, I guess you could lose this position. I could lose this position, but hopefully not. So those are a few themes right there. And I would just remember this bishop takes h7 situation, right? And remember, if you get to this position, if they go pawn grabbing, remember bishop takes h7 with this idea of, with these mating ideas, with rook coming to h1 ideas, and possibly, knight d2, long castle situation, and then owning on the dark squares because black's dark squared bishop is completely pinned down. It's nothing, it can't develop. We never give it time to develop. So that was backing up again. So we had knight takes seven, knight takes f7, and you could king takes f7 loses the queen. So instead they could play queen a5 check. Now we could also have knight takes f7, and what if they play queen d5? And I think queen d5 is a pretty direct move. You can see it says 6%. So the top three moves here, what you're going to see. King f7, queen a5, or queen d5. So we'll cover this last one. Queen d5 is pretty good. It's maybe the black's the best shot, but it's still completely losing. So after queen d5, you essentially go right after this g2, right? You see they saw this weakness on g2, and they're going to attack it right away. And it's essentially an accelerated version of the queen a5, queen d5 situation, right? So after queen d5 directly, we still play knight takes h8, let them take on g2, rook f1, very similar to last time. Maybe they double attack, right? They're putting some more. They think they're putting more pressure on the rook. This is just one possible move, but let's say they put more pressure on the rook. We play knight d2, defend the rook, knight f3, bishop g4, bishop e2. It seems like we're just kind of shuffling pieces around here. But after rook d8, right, aligning with our queen, we have an amazing move here. We have an amazing move, and it kind of plays off of it plays off of a few things, but knight f7. I mean, so great. Like, what an amazing move. And the idea here is that after king takes f7, we have rook g1, and the queen has nowhere to go except walk straight into a fork on g5. And when I saw this, I was like, oh my goodness, this move is crazy. So you sack your knight to get the king into like prepare the king to be forked once you force the queen onto the only square it can go to. Because you've been threatening to play rook g1 for a while, and the queen is completely stuck here, right? They can't go here, can't go here, can't go here because of the rook, can't go here. This pawn is defended. This rook controls the g file, and only move is queen h3, and you're forking if the king is on f7. I thought this was really nice. So after King takes f7, rook g1, queen h3. You have knight g3, forking the king and the queen and winning material there. I thought that was a really interesting line. And you have this really cool kind of tactic at the end with the queen being forced onto h3. Now, if you might be saying, okay, Sam, that's great, but it looks like after queen d5, this bishop h3 line is pretty aggressive. And that's totally fair. Instead, they could play something like bishop g4. So, attacking the queen, putting the light squared bishop on an active square. I think this is the most common moves. Yeah, bishop g4 is the most common move here, and we'll definitely see that bishop g4 has excuse me, bishop g4 has a little bit of playability, but we can certainly counter it. So bishop g4, uh, f3, right? Simply blocking the attack on our queen. Bishop h3. Now again, trying to kind of drum up some pressure on the rook on f1. e3 and bishop e3. Queen takes the pawn. Rook f2. Bishop, queen g1 check. King up and queen trade. And at the end of the day, you've essentially simplified into a winning endgame here, right? Like I think the white is just slightly better here. Yeah, about +3, so pretty significantly better. And yeah, it's just going to be really nice for for white to play. You're up material. You're going to continue to put a lot of pressure on black. And honestly, like again, this is just out of the opening, you've done really well, right? You've played 13 moves here, and you're completely winning, right? So no problems at all. Possibly after bishop g4, f3, h3, bishop e3, you could have rook f2, which is essentially just what we did before, forcing the queen trade, and you're just up material here after the queen trade. So yeah, this could be another way to go as well. So you're kind of trading down into this completely winning endgame. Maybe black can pick off your knight here, but again, you're up a rook, so it's not that big of a deal. And you can see that white is doing fairly well here. Another thing that we can look at, especially move eight here. We talked about bishop h3. We talked about bishop g4. Another possible move would be just queen grabs the pawn immediately, and this just isn't going to go very well for black. So after knight g6. Bam. Amazing move. Taking advantage of this G6 square again, because remember that theme in the back of your head. If bishop gets here and there's nothing to defend G6, it's game over. It's checkmate, right? H6, it's pound, right? It's game over. So really, after after knight G6, we've now kind of un gotten our knight out of h8. It's a little bit more active again. He can't take on g6 because of mate. So f3, again, blocking this bishop after it develops. Queen g3 check, rook here, and we get a little queen trade. Boom. Well, not quite yet. Few checks, blah, 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 blah. White's doing well here. So yeah, so black doesn't have to trade the queens. I think I've switched up the lines here. But yeah, after rook f2, queen check, he can take and we can recapture again. It's just winning endgame here, right? For white, you're just doing very well. You have no issues. In fact, black's best move is to trade the queens, right? It's not getting any better. He can give all the checks he wants, but eventually you're going to cover things up. This is now pinned, so he can't take the knight. And even after he continues to bother our pieces, King D8, where we have a queen trade. I'm not sure exactly where else he's going to go. Queen G2. And again, he's just really forced to trade here, right? If he just backs away, it's not going to be good for him. It's really not going to be that great for black. And this king is cut in the center. Our pieces are going to become active. We're up material, and it's just not going to be a good time, right? It's just not going to be fun. So what else do we have here? There's one really interesting line that I did want to show, which was, we can give all these checks. So if we go back into it, so go back to our moves, we've got rook f2, or we'll start back from queen takes h2. So if queen grabs, Knight g6, we block with our pawn. We go through this sequence of checks, whatnot. We continue to block with the knight, or excuse me, with the rook. We continue to do this, blah 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 blah. Bring the knight back. He tries to pin, and then queen e2, pinning that pawn. We continue on here, and after rook f3, king d8, queen g2. We also have queen h6, right? So instead of queen g2, right, or excuse me, instead of queen g2, instead of queen h6, right? We have queen takes g7 here, right? A nice move with the fork potential on e6, right? Knight takes e6, king e7, knight takes g7. Yeah, so a really cool move there. It looks like you're obviously like a nice little oh no my queen situation right there. We also have you can play queen h4, but again after the fork on e6, he's so weak on the light squares without his light squared bishop. Not much he can do. Queen takes g2 check. If it goes into the trade, we're doing just fine, right? We're doing absolutely just fine after this trade. And this isn't a fork necessarily because we can just sack and get, a piece and we can sacrifice, we can get a piece and a pawn for a rook, and we're already up so much material that doesn't even matter. So yeah, at the end of the day, this is just completely winning and a really fun series of lines for white. And that's a large chunk of it right there. We'll also, moving into the next situation here, there's other responses for black. So after bishop takes d3, they don't have to play knight f6, right? We looked at knight f6 before. They don't have to play knight f6. They can also play h6, which again loses for the same exact reason. And if you look at the book, Knight f6 and h6 are the two top moves here, right? Knight f6, h6, your two top moves, and they both lose, right? This loses on the spot again. King takes f7, boom, it's game over. King takes g6, and we're winning, right? Really nice. H7 is just not, it's not going to cut it here. Or excuse me, h6 is just not going to cut it here. Knight takes f7 is just, it's game over. King takes f7. Queen h5 check even. Look at this. G6. Queen takes g6 pound. Look at that. I think I put some moves on the board. It wasn't even the best move, right? Knight takes f7. You don't even need to play queen g6 here. Queen g6 is winning, obviously, right? Like it's completely winning, but like look at this. It's mate in six. Boom, 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 pound. Amazing. Like it's just like H6 is completely losing. And a lot of people are going into this, right? And it looks like a lot of people are still playing Bishop G6 check here because they've thought about that theme. But you can actually do one better if they've already played H6, they've really weakened G6. And we've seen all of the activity you can have on G6 and all of the tactics there. Well, this one just leads to mate immediately, right? This one just leads to mate immediately. So super cool stuff. One other, I mean, we can look at a few different lines here. There's a little bit going on here for black, but most of it's fairly straightforward. Another move we can look at instead of king takes f7 would be queen a5 check. We've looked at this check before, and after bishop d2, going after g2, our response is the same. Knight takes h8. If king takes g2, we even have bishop g6 check here. Now it's not quite mate yet because of the d file is still blocked, but after king d8, we still have bishop a5 pound. I mean, this is nasty with the double check on the king from the bishop and the queen. Really great stuff here. Absolutely annihilating black. And so technically it's still made even though it was blocked when we gave the bishop g6 check. Um, Obviously he could sacrifice his queen to stop this, but again, you're just going to be up the queen. Remember, knights can move backwards. Knights can move backwards. Yeah. So possibly bishop D or king d7 runs into a similar situation after bishop f4, unveiling the check from our queen on the d file. This is just going to be pretty nasty for black. He can take all the material that they want, but it's just game over. I mean, look at this. Look at these. Look at these cuts. King back, win the queen. It's game over, right? It doesn't matter. They could also play queen d5 in this situation. So just like last time, we talked about king takes, we talked about queen a5. There's also queen d5 here. So after queen d5, knight takes h8 again. And if they go after your pawn, g6 check, like I mentioned before, and you're just winning, right? There is no blocking on d2. You're simply winning. He has to sack the queen. If he doesn't, well, there is no other move. There's no other legal move. He has to sack. And then after knight f6, possibly instead of g2, you could have knight f6. Instead of queen takes g2, knight c3, just hitting the queen, kind of forcing this capture on g2. And after g6 check again, it's just completely over, right? There's nothing that black can do here. Um, if they realize that and play queen e5 instead, bishop e3 blocking the check, bishop f5, knight g6. So dirty. This move is so dirty. So we're hitting the queen, right? We're hitting the queen. And if bishop takes g6, we have bishop takes g6 pound. See, so many tactics with this knight moving backwards. It's just so important to keep thinking about exactly what could happen. When can I move my knight back? How vulnerable is g6? And if they play h6, just know that that square it's just going to have so many tactics on it, especially with the open d file and this bishop, this beautiful light squared bishop. After after knight g6, they could play queen e6, recognizing the threat, moving away from the attack and also not taking, which would result in mate. We can play knight takes f8, just simply winning, getting a piece. I mean, our knight has now taken a rook and their dark square bishop. King takes f8, bishop takes f5, queen takes f5, and queen d8 check. It's just really not great for black here. King f7, castles. They can go after g2. It's doesn't matter. This is completely over. Um, yeah, as you can see, it's entirely over, right? Queen back. Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think that's going to go well for you. So yeah, those are a few lines there. Um, one other thing I wanted to look at was after G6, I guess you could also have a few different moves here. So you could play King E, they could play King E6, which also loses after Queen E5 check, or excuse Queen F5 check. I would actually maybe this is a nice calculation exercise if you wanted to figure out the mate here. But Queen F5 check, King to D6. Bishop f4, continuing to get our bishops out. E5 blocking, and then queen takes e5, d7, and we have a really nice mate here after bishop f5, right? Just completely controlling everything black does. King f6 doesn't do much better, right? King f6, you just end up in a similar situation after queen g6, king e5, f4 check, sacrificing the bishop, but allowing us g3, right? With this, you know, this nice little kind of mate, and it's completely game over for black. So nice sacrifice there from white. Cool. So let's get into it three. We've got a we've got another nice example here. This one involves e4, c6, d3, d whatever, blah blah blah. We've already talked about this. Bishop takes d3, e6, and we still have a really nice move. So we've talked about h6. We've talked about knight f6. What about e6? Right? E6 seems like an interesting one. It's an interesting try at least. You're not weakening g6. Right. It seems like it might be a slightly better move. If we look at the book, we see e6 is actually okay for black here. It's not the best move, but we can see that white only has 56 to 41 here instead of f6 or h6. But I'll show you some really nice retorts to e6 that I think still give white a really nice position. E6 is not the computer move. Computer suggests queen c7, like I think I mentioned that last time. But yeah, so basically after e6, we have knight takes h7 still, which is a really nice move. I think one of the reasons why I think one of the reasons why this isn't as winning for white is because folks haven't studied this pretty far, and so knight takes h7 is completely winning for white here. So if we go to knight takes h7, well, I mean, not completely winning, but it's quite nice. It's quite nice for white, and you'll see that white is winning here. It's just the fact that not many people have played it. So knight takes h7, knight f6, and knight takes f8. So we now take that bishop. We've seen that a couple times. King takes f8, no more castling for black. Knight bd7, bishop e3, knight e5, bishop back to e2, normal developing, queen d7, h4. We're probably going to go after this uncap this king, see if we can't push our pawns. And I think this is a fine endgame for I mean, it may trade off into an endgame, but I think this is pretty comfortable for white to play here. Like I don't think I mean, White's certainly winning here, but even back here, before Black made certain choices, right? I think this is still pretty comfortable for White, and you can easily get a nice position out of this. So yeah, H7 is still taking on H7 is still super reasonable here. And sure, it doesn't look as winning, but I think you can get a really nice position because most people aren't playing nice knight takes H7 after E6. Something else that could happen here after knight takes H7 would be bishop E7, after which we can play this interesting, again, we're just going after him immediately, queen h5, which seems a little premature, but remember, we've taken on h7, and we are threatening a discovered check, taking this undefended rook on h8, right? So if g6, attacking the queen, we can play bishop takes g6, f g6, queen g6, king d7, king's on the run again, f4, right? Completely cutting the king. We like to cut this king. You'll notice that this bishop really likes f4, loves to come to f4. Knight f6, trying to develop. Knight takes f6 check. Bishop takes f6. Knight c3, continuing to develop, looking for some ideas, possibly jumping the knight into c5. And we have a lot of stuff going on here for white. Like this is just going to be really it's going to be nice for us, right? This rook is coming to this file. This position's kind of playing itself. We have a few checks here, and it's going to be hard for black to last very long. It's +5 at this point, right? So it's just a really excellent position. I can back out, and after bishop e7, queen h5, g6, there could also be knight f6, could be played immediately. But after knight takes f6 check, bishop takes f6, queen h8, it's not looking good for our friend here. It's basically over. G6 could also be played immediately, right? So knight f6. You could also have g6 played here, and knight takes f8 again. It just you're trading off this knight. He's open. I mean, his dark squared bishop is now open because he's played e6 and g6, right? So it's not trapped behind those pawns. We can offload this knight that's kind of off on its own on h7, and because he's played g6, we don't have this nice queen f h5 situation. So here we can just kind of play a nice developing move. I think queen e2 is actually queen e2. Yeah, queen e2 is a novelty here. It hasn't been played. I like Queen E2 here a lot because after Queen E2, something like a normal developing move like Knight D7, you push your bishop on E3, Knight GF6, Knight C3, and oh, it looks like there are a couple games that transposed into this. And after King G7, H4, B6, it's pretty nice for white here, right? There's not a lot of uh there's not a lot of like thought at this point. I think you're mostly just going to long castle, look to go over black's kind of a loose king there. And it's not completely winning here, but I think you're doing really really well. Yeah, so Queen E2 here is kind of an interesting move, and yeah, I think that white is just going to do really really well. There's not much that black can do here, and you're just going to start to put a lot of pressure on them. So, so yeah, I think that's what I wanted to cover with that chapter. On to the next one, I have after bishop takes d3, knight d7, knight takes h7. So after bishop takes d3, knight bd7 is our fourth most played move. So this still has 7%. Excuse me. It still has 7% here, and you'll see that it's the worst of the top four for white here. It seems like black is doing fine, but again, I think that white can get a very nice position. So same thing with e6. After knight b d7, we can still take on h7, right? And after knight gf6, we can play knight takes f8 and king takes f8. And so we're going to get into this kind of similar endgame that we've seen in the past with offloading the knight for that dark squared bishop. And then we're going to develop our pieces pretty normally and get after it. After knight gf6, if they play knight e5 right away, knight takes f8. So again, offloading the knight, knight takes d3, queen takes d3, queen takes d3, and pawn takes d3. Again, it's an end game. I mean you don't have to agree with me, but it's going to be pretty equal here. I don't know. It's probably a draw. Um, you're not seeing a lot of games go like this, but yeah, you might get a draw every once in a while. I don't know what to say. Life's not all peaches and roses. So after G6, so again, after knight D7, knight takes H7, we could have G6 here. And G6 is certainly it's an interesting move. And again, just offloading the knight pretty much every single time here. That's the theme in this knight knight BD7 situation, knight C3, queen C7, bishop E3, knight GF6. And, there's some threats on H2 here from the queen and the rook. Queen D2, we don't really have to we don't have to really look after those threats. We can kind of just let it happen because if black takes on H1, we're just going to recapture with our knight and then look at this file, right? He's not protecting H8. So we've seen the rook come to this open H file before. So there's nothing, they're not banning us from doing it again. So if rook takes H1, rook takes H1, we're doing fine here. Like this is completely uh this is completely winning for white. And then I mean this is a really nice move. You're threatening mate, right? If this bishop wasn't here, you'd be threatening mate on H6, so you can play this nice move, bishop to B6. I don't know if I double exclam it. I think that might have been a little bit aggressive here with the double exclam, but it's certainly a really nice move, threatening the queen and then also threatening mate. So having to defend that in some way. Um, yeah, so that's the other variation there. So you'll see a little bit of a draw, but there's still some trickiness there. There is still some trickiness there. Let's get into some of the deeper stuff here. This is the real deep stuff. We've got one line here. I think it's pretty interesting. So E4, we have our similar situation. Bishop takes B3, and it looks like F6. So F6 has not been played very much. Maybe just like kicking away the trying to kick away our knight on G5, but not in the H6 manner, in the anti-bend Feingold playing F6. And yeah, it's basically over after Queen H5. A lot of people playing Knight F7 here. Knight F7 here, hoping for this like the same situation with bishop and then winning the queen. But you can actually go for better. Yeah, so many people, I mean, people are just going after this like win the queen line over and over again. But there's actually better here after after knight excuse me, after they play F7, which is queen to H5, G6, and then obviously bishop takes G6 and queen takes G6. It's really nice. There's no choice but to play queen, king D7, and after knight F7, attacking the queen and this rook, we have queen A5 check, attempting to get away, just the knight out to block. Queen H5, right? Trying to trade off this queen and pin our knight, but we have a really nice move, and it doesn't seem like it's only this position hasn't been reached very much, but knight takes H8 I thought was really nice because you're winning material. If the queen takes, that's fine. You've just won the exchange. And if queen takes queen, right, you can just simply recapture with the knight, and you're up a full rook. Right, so something like queen takes h8, bishop e3, long castles. It's going to be a fun game for you. All right, the finale, VII. So after bishop takes d3, e5. What about e5? E5. There's only 3% here. We're still doing fairly well, right? Because we're still going to have weaknesses. There's still going to be a lot of weaknesses for black, and h7 is still going to be taken. So after e5, queen h5, right in the face. This is another theme, this queen h5 theme. Have that in the back of your head. Trying to kick us away? Okay, fine. We'll play queen e2 and hit this e5 pawn. How are you going to defend the e5 pawn? Oh, sure. Play bishop g7. Okay, well, I'll play bishop c4, attacking that weakness you have on f7, right? Kind of something in the Moore, right? If you ever play in the Smith Moore and someone rips out e5, my mind is immediately thinking, okay, now f7 has got to be weak, right? I should be looking at that. Bishop, knight h6. I'm saying all the pieces without the red piece. Knight h6, knight c3, castles, and yeah, after h4, bishop f5. I think you're just gonna blow down Black's house here. It's pretty good. I don't think this is quite completely winning for White, but you have a significant advantage here, and I think it's going to be much more fun for you to play than for Black to defend this attack. After Queen h5, g6, they could also play Queen f6, attempting to defend f7 with their queen, which you can hit with knight h7, walking into this pin, but it's not really pinned because it's difficult to attack that knight, and it's defended by the bishop on d3. You might think that g6 is a little bit worrying here, but after g6 you'd simply take the queen back with check and you'd be completely winning, right? This is just game over. So after knight takes h7, queen e7, dropping the queen back away from the attack from the knight. We can play knight f6 check with the discovery on the undefended rook. If knight takes, queen takes, e4, bishop e2, and yeah, we're going to be up material here, and it should be fine for us. If after queen h5, knight h6, defending f7, we can again take on h7. If they develop the bishop, we can simply take the knight, and we're doing really, really well. Cool. So anyway, hope that was a nice overview. I know there was a lot of moves. I know there was a lot going on there, but at the end of the day, I really think that this opening has a lot of tactical potentials and a lot of fun, right? There's a few themes. So if we can think about some themes, sometimes the H file comes open, taking on F7, taking on H7, winning the queen. Sometimes the queen can come out to F3 and allow our rook to come to H1, pinning the queen. There may be some fork action on bishop on if we can drag the opponent's king out to f7, you can easily bail out and take this bishop on f8 if they play some more of the sound moves. And if you ever see f7, then rip it out, right? Rip out queen h5. So hopefully that was pretty informational and really give them the business in this opening. Take care.